Welcome to the Maybe Baby Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Mariah Montgomery. Here we'll discuss all things infertility like heartbreak, joy, growth, loss, and the wild, crazy journey that it is. Let's bring awareness, education, and understanding to the table. You aren't alone. Together, we've got this. Jordan and Shelly, welcome to the podcast.
Hey!
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I'm so excited that you guys are here and that we're going to hear about your journey and where you guys have been. So tell me how you guys met.
How we met.
Yeah. Throwing it way back.
Yeah, we're throwing it way back. Well, you didn't ask us like when we were born. So we met when I was 15. Jordan was 17, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we actually worked at a Boy Scout camp together. So it's just kind of funny because I wanted to be there. Like I wanted to work at Boy Scout camp. I have my family. It's a big history of scouting, and
my dad ran the camp. I was forced to be there.
So by default he was there, but he got a cute girlfriend out of it and eventually a cute wife. So
cute.
It was worth it.
Yeah, so it was pretty much from there we just became best friends and dated till Jordan left on his mission.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Will you wait for me?" And I'm like, "No."
At least you're
I'm not going to be one of those girls.
Yeah.
So, because I had just accepted a scholarship out of state. And so I wasn't going to, you don't want to mess anything up. Like, I was ready to go have an adventure, and I didn't want him either to not have an adventure. So we went ahead and did our own thing for a couple of years. And then when he came back, we were still just very best friends. So we decided, I guess this is what you do. You get married. So we got married, and we have been married for 12 years now. 12, almost 13.
Almost 13
it will be
years.
13 in August.
I cannot handle that.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my gosh.
That's how it feels for us.
A long time.
Yeah. So Jordan and Shelly and I, we all know each other, and I've known Shelly for like years.
Ever.
And now hearing that it's been
Like
that long, I'm like,
little.
wait, what?
Yeah, we
Where
were.
did that go?
We don't feel old enough to be married that long.
No. Yeah. Like you and I have probably known each other like, not 40 years, 20 years.
10 years in a period of time.
Yes. Probably like around 20-ish years. Yeah. A long time.
That's crazy.
Because you live just down the street and around the corner. You and Emily.
Yeah. Man, that's
like,
crazy.
We would just
Wow. Okay. Anyways.
throwback to the days. But yeah, that's how we met.
Oh, I love it.
So, yeah.
So you guys dated for a while. I mean, kind of just because of the nature of a mission and everything
when
happening.
we met. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you guys start to have like the let's start a family conversation?
So when we first got married, we decided we wanted to wait, pay off debt, get ready to, take our time to get to know each other and
Well, we just
build a
wanted
relationship.
to go on adventures. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was like 5 years into being married, we decided we wanted to try and have kids.
Hey, let's do this thing.
And we thought, it'll just happen.
And it did. It did initially. Our first pregnancy, we got pregnant the very first month we tried. And we're like, okay, well, this is just what happens. When you turn it on, you turn it on. Yeah. I don't know. But then we lost that baby at 8.5 weeks. And that was like a shock to our system. Like, this happens? Like, we had, of course we had heard of people having miscarriages and going through those kind of things. But I never thought it would be us. Yeah. Because I don't know.
Because why would it be you, right?
Why would it be you? Like
we were doing everything right.
Yeah. Right. Like everyone. And there wasn't really a history. Like my sisters hadn't had miscarriages. My mom didn't have miscarriages. Like my mom is the fertilist myrtle, So really, I come from a family of 9 kids. And so I don't know, to me, I was like, well, that wouldn't ever be part of our story. And so when we lost that baby, that was really a shock to our system. And so they just said, well, keep trying. And so once I healed up, we started trying again, and 2 years passed by and still nothing happened. And then we got pregnant again. That was, sometime it was just almost about 2 years later, we got pregnant again. And we ended up actually not not realizing we were pregnant until we lost the baby. So it wasn't until I found out I was pregnant and miscarrying in the same sentence. And I remember the nurse calling me, and I was at work that morning, and she was like, she wouldn't say the word miscarriage for some reason. I was like trying to get her to say it. Like, so I'm miscarrying. So I'm, but she wouldn't say it. She was just like, so your pregnancy wasn't viable. And I was like, I was ready for them to call me and tell me like I had like a tumor or something. Like I was not expecting for them to tell me that I was pregnant or miscarrying. And so when she was like, she said that I was pregnant, but that my levels were dropping, I was like, what? Like, so I'm miscarrying. And that just brought a lot of confusion when that happened the second time. Because after 2 years, we were kind of like, okay, well, like, why isn't this working? But then to have it work, but like things have the complications with that second one, really threw us off, because I had had a period and then the next week I was bleeding again. And so then when they said I was pregnant, I was like, what? Like, how does this happen? And that's why I was so not even ready for that to be the deal. So I guess after that, we decided to just dig into things more. So we went to our OB and we had him. He was amazing and just ran every test under the sun for us that we asked for. And he was awesome until he came to a point and he's like, I've got to be honest, like I can't run anything else for you. Like there's not really anything else I can give you that's really going to be pertinent to help you guys out. And so it was around that time that we decided to go to a fertility doctor and start that whole journey. And this whole time we kind of did this secretly. Like we had family members that like they knew about our miscarriages, or her friends. They knew these things, but like we were pretty hush-hush about at the time, like what was kind of going on, because we weren't ready to open up at that point.
Well, and it was a painful topic to talk about, because every time you talk about it, it brings back the feelings of when we lost the kids. And then whenever you go to talk to the people, they start asking all these questions, and then you have to relive all of the experiences you had while you're trying to explain to them what happened when they have no context for it. And most of the time the advice they're going to try and give isn't helpful.
Or you get the other end where people are like, ooh, like they don't know what to say to you. And so, and you're not like prepared enough emotionally to like be okay that they're not okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we were very much in that realm that whole time, because we just...
Because most of the time they're just going to say, oh, it'll all work out, which is not a helpful thing to say to somebody going through that. It's a good way to get punched.
Yes. Yeah. So, so we started going through treatments. And of course, at first they were like, you guys are textbook. Like all the tests they ran on us, it was, oh, you guys are textbook. If there was somebody that was going to get pregnant, it would be you guys. And I was like, okay, well, then why isn't it happening?
It's not helpful.
Yeah, this is not helpful at all.
I know.
And so, of course, they started doing time cycles with Famara, and then they moved us on to doing IUIs. And we probably did about 4 or 5 IUIs with our first clinic. And we were just so frustrated after those IUIs, because you know how it is. Like, it's already enough to be invested like every month, to be invested with just Famara, but then you're adding on all these drugs, and then like the tracking and everything is just
and
so
has to be like perfectly timed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everything. It's like, it's a miracle people even get pregnant. Like, once you go through all of that, you're like, no, people just, this doesn't happen. Like,
they lied in high school when they told you not to have sex, you're going to get pregnant. You're a liar. It does not happen that way.
Right. And so, like, we just, it gets overwhelming really quick when you're going through that. And we realized we didn't feel like we had a doctor or a clinic that was in our corner. Like we very much at that clinic, we felt like a number. We felt like move on through. We always were the ones that like had to call them when we wanted to start a cycle, or we were the ones that like we had to ask like they would say do this next, but they wouldn't give us any context. And I think that was kind of the beginning of our journey of realizing like we had to decide that like we had to be our own best advocates. And around then we started doing a lot of research and looking at holistic stuff and looking at like different clinics and changing our clinic and to get somebody in our corner and get it like interviewing doctors and deciding who we wanted to work with instead of just seeing who we would be given.
Yeah.
And kind of owning our journey up to that point. And I feel like that, I don't know, you can speak to that, but I feel like that was a shift in our journey when we chose to do that.
Yeah.
Our other doctor, he would ask us, what do you guys want to do next? We're not the doctor. I don't know what we can do next. So like Shelly said, we started doing a lot of research and figured out that there were a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
And that's when we started seeking out like URIC, what is it? Is that right?
Yeah, UIRC.
And other resources and talking to people about what they had gone through and figuring out that the community was a lot bigger than we thought it was.
Yeah.
That like, not only like being part of a couple that had miscarriages was like this secret club that a lot of people had done and gone, or not done, had happened to them and gone through it in silence.
It's like the club you don't want to be a part of, but when you're a part of it, you're like, there are a lot of people in this club.
So many.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then not realizing that 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 couples go through fertility treatments.
1 in 6 now.
Really?
Yeah. That just changed
That's crazy.
in February. 1 in 6.
Really?
Yeah.
And realizing people just really don't talk about it a whole lot. And for good reason, because you don't know who you can be comfortable talking to about it. Because if people haven't gone through it, then they're not helpful most of the time. But the amount of resources that were out there, we were surprised how many resources we were able to find. But finding a new doctor changed everything.
Everything.
Well, and going through marriage counseling together.
Yeah. We found an infertility marriage counselor through UIRC. And that was like we had a good marriage, but we knew we needed more support than what we had within our marriage and individually. And that was a game changer too, to have that in our life.
Yeah. Having somebody we could talk to and could help us process some of the negative emotions or just emotions we were going through, rather than just holding them all in. Because especially guys don't really talk about their emotions, especially not if it's negative. But like you have to be strong for your wife and be there to support her, and then struggle through things yourself quietly.
And I think at that time, like Jordan was pretty involved the entire time of our journey, like our entire story. Like Jordan was always pretty involved, but too, I think at that turning point, Jordan really stepped it up a notch. Like he was like fully invested. He started up to that point, he did come to every single appointment with me. But at that point we switched doctors, and our doctor, we went from having a doctor that was 5 minutes away from our house to 50 minutes away from our house. If there wasn't traffic.
Yes.
Because we would have to go clear down to Utah County. And he would drive me to every single appointment. Even if I just had blood work, he would take work off. He'd come and pick me up. We would drive there, do whatever we need to do. He would take me to get my cupcake at my favorite cupcake place. We had a routine. Yes, absolutely. We had to have the reward, you know?
Yeah.
And then he would bring me back, drop me off, and we'd go on with our day or whatever it was. But I think it was at that time that he just realized, like, where's my support? And so as we were finding so much community for me as a woman and people that could relate with me. But I know he was really struggling to find support for himself.
Yeah.
And community for men going through infertility as, with their spouse or individual or whatever it was. And so I don't know. I feel like that's something that you should share your thoughts on is, I don't know, because because that was a big part of too, like we ended up having a fundraiser when we found out we needed to do IVF, and we decided very methodically, that fundraiser was going to be geared like toward something that that men like to do.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, you guys were talking more about your journey then, because you had a fundraiser, so people like knew that you guys were going through it.
Yeah.
Right.
So what was that like finally telling people what you were going through?
We wrote a letter to our family because it's not something we could share vocally without getting like emotional and then having to worry about people's answers and all the questions they brought. Whereas if we could explain it all in a written out, then there's one, we could say things that we wouldn't know how to, like we had time to think it out as opposed to having to explain it on the fly.
Articulate a little bit better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And being more blunt with people and have still come across nicely.
Yeah.
Explaining that like, we're going through this is why we're not coming. Because we hadn't been, like for years, we didn't go to church on Mother's Day or Father's Day. We would go on vacation and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because it was just, it sucked.
Or on holidays or...
Yeah, or like holidays, we wouldn't go to family get-togethers because it was just, people would ask, how's it going?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're just trying to help. Yeah. I understand.
They're excited for you guys too. Yeah.
And...
Or we didn't want to, like, we love our niece and nephews. We love them, but we didn't want to go to their birthday parties.
No.
And things like that.
And that's okay to not do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, your own mental health is more important than a birthday party for a niece or nephew that isn't going to remember or care whether or not you were there. Like, as long as you send them a present, they're good.
Yeah, they're fine.
Right?
They could care less if you're there.
Yeah.
They just want to hang out with their friends.
Yeah.
And or even family get-togethers, it had no consequence on our marriage, whether or not we were there. But if we went, we were down for days after.
Yeah.
But in telling people our story and telling everybody what we were doing, we decided to write it out because of the fact that it was going to be easier that way. And then we shared it with everybody.
Yeah.
Close friends and family, distant family.
We mailed it. I remember we mailed it to all of like our close friends and family.
Yeah. And that way it was something they could sit down and read and not a text that was impersonal and just like sent.
That was
I mean, I don't think...
And we put at the end, like, if you have questions, like, please come to us. You know, like, it wasn't like, we're not coming, don't ever invite us.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't, you know, it was just clear, like, hey, like, we just need to have permission to say, like, essentially we needed to know that you guys know, like, we are giving ourselves permission to say no to these things because we just don't have the bandwidth right now. Not to say we never will again, but we just didn't have the bandwidth right then to, you know, be a part of maybe some of those things going on within the family or with friend groups or, and sometimes there were times it was like, yes, we can go, like that's totally fine, you know, but it was very much like a day-to-day kind of thing.
But things got a lot better.
You do reach that point.
Things got a lot better after that. People stopped asking certain questions because we gave some examples of things that...
They stopped asking the when question.
Yeah.
I forgot we even wrote the letter. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think that is such a smart idea.
I totally forgot about the letter.
I have it on my other Google...
I might have it on my Google Drive.
Is it like long?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was
like a full
page and a half.
Yeah,
Guys, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because it was an opportunity to share things that there's no way we could have shared it in person.
It's too hard sometimes. Like,
yeah. And then you're worried about being judged for sharing it. And then some people aren't in the right state of mind. Like, when would you share that? At a family get-together? Okay, everybody be quiet. I just want to share something negative with all of you. I'm just going to bring this event down.
Yeah, as hard as I can.
Yeah. And because that's what it felt like. Like, because we talked about sharing it. And then people would come up to us, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you guys were going through that. Like, how long have you guys been struggling? And then the questions start. And they're not bad. But then if you're at a family get-together, if you're at my family, you're talking about at least 18 people that potentially, like, we're going to have questions and stuff. And so I think it was our marriage counselor, the infertility counselor, who encouraged us to do it. Mm-hmm. She had said, like, she encouraged us to write it for us and for them.
Yeah, for us. And she's like, and then after we wrote it and read it to her, she's like, would you guys want to send that out to people? And we're like, with some tweaks. Yeah. And like, so with her help, we made it exactly what we wanted to say to people, and sent it out. And as our family members and friends got the letter, they reached out to us and they were like, hey, we got your letter. Like, either we didn't know or we didn't realize how, like, that it was that you guys were carrying that big of a load, or, they were very supportive. Like, there was so much positivity and love that came from that letter. There was zero judgment. And it gave us the ability to free up ourselves to be vulnerable to where we were at. Mm-hmm. And that's when Jordan's brothers actually came to us and they were like, hey, we want to do a fundraiser for you guys. And we were like, oh, okay, like, that's not really, that's not why we sent out the letter. Like, it's not because we need money. Like, it was just because, like, we needed you guys to know, you know, for our mental health. And so it was like a couple of months where they kept bringing up, like, let us do something for you. Let us do something for you. And we were just like, not now. Like, we don't really need something right now.
The next family get together we went to, my brothers took me outside and told me they wanted to do the fundraiser.
So sweet.
Yeah. And that was kind of overwhelming. I remember Jordan, like, I was like, what did your brothers want? And
go here and have this secret, very intense conversation.
Right, because I did notice when he came in, he was like all solemn and stuff. But even then, it was a couple months before, it was a few months before we were finally like, okay, I guess we have a reason that, like, you guys want to, because at that point, we were still doing some more testing to see if we did need to move on to IVF. And
like, I went and got tested. Mm-hmm. That's weird.
Yeah, man.
I say that. I have to clarify because of the crowd that's going to hear this. Not weird compared to the tests the girls go through, right? Way less weird than that. But I was the youngest guy in that office by, like, 40 years.
Gotta love urologists.
Those guys that must get paid a lot to look at old man junk all day.
Brent's not on this podcast episode. He's just kind of, like, sitting off listening, and he's over there, like, laughing because he can. He just,
any guy.
I know.
That's been through that.
I tried to joke
solidarity.
With the guy. Because I was like, this is super awkward. All he did is say, pull down your pants.
Yeah.
No lead up or anything. And I was like, you gonna take me on a date first? And he didn't laugh. He just looked at me all serious.
Made it even more awkward.
No, it's really awkward.
You're like, I just am not here.
He just sat down there quietly, doing his work.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Cool beans.
Every appointment for girls is invasive.
Yeah.
It was my only one of only two invasive appointments I went to. So I have no room to complain. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that that really actually opened my eyes to how much the Shelly was going through at every appointment, because that was the first time that, like, other than them drawing blood work for, like, testosterone levels and all of that stuff. But, like, I remember sitting there being like, this must be what it's like for Shelly every appointment. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, like, it's a lot to go through.
Emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
So we did end up needing to do IVF, and we were really, really blessed because at the time I had found an organization that they had at the time, I think they have a local one now, but they had a virtual, like, infertility group that I could meet up with, and it was girls all over the country. Amazing podcast, Sarah's Laughter, and it really did strengthen me and help me. That podcast was, like, every morning I like turned it on, whether I'd already listened to that episode or not. You need to have those things. You need to know what fuels you, especially when you get depleted so quickly. Going through infertility, you like get so overwhelmed, in a matter of seconds, right? And so I remember being on one of those calls with that group of girls, and one of the girls brought up that she had been accepted into a study, and that they were going to pay for her to do her IVF. I'm like, well,
I won't
give up the name. Like, what study are you a part of, friend? And it actually ended up that there was myself and then 3 other girls that were able to make it into that study as well, because she had brought that up.
That's amazing.
And, every clinic was a little bit different that did it, but luckily it happened to be that my clinic, the clinic that we had moved to only a few months prior, that they were in that, they were doing that study. It was the only clinic in the state of Utah doing that study. And the slot that I took was actually the last slot available for that study. And it was a study that had been done around the world already. It was actually, I was one of the very last people in the study. And it was for FSH, the hormone that you take to stimulate your follicles, follicle stimulation hormone.
Yeah.
And it's that it was derived from human genome instead of pig genome, which is what they typically use. And so I was like, well, I'm okay with that. And so they didn't pay. Every clinic did it a little bit different, like how they had it worked out with the study. So my clinic didn't pay for all of our IVF, but it paid a big chunk of it. But there was still we still needed about $4,000, which is like a drop in a bucket for what I know a lot of people have to fork out for their IVF.
But it's still it's a good amount of money.
Yeah. But it's still not like, oh yeah, I just got that in my back pocket 1 second, especially it's just, we weren't newlyweds, but
we'd been paying for fertility treatments for a while. And when every ultrasound costs $300,
yep,
$4,000 is a lot of money
Ching.
because you're already paying for all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we were accepted into that study, but then they did the fundraiser for us to help us earn the rest. And I want you to share about how you and your brothers came to the consensus of what you were going to do, because I honestly don't know if I've ever asked you.
So how we came to the idea of what we were going to do for a fundraiser is because one, it wanted to be something that we felt like would be fun for a lot of people to do, that a lot of people would enjoy doing. But I also wanted it to be something where my family would feel comfortable being involved and helping with it.
And other men.
Yeah, and other guys, because there really is no support, hardly any support for men out there. And we talked about different things, and some people that they had talked about doing a bake sale, and I was like, no. I'm not doing. Not there's anything wrong with doing a bake sale. They talked about doing getting donations from different companies and doing an auction, which a lot of people do and they have success with. But we wanted to have something that was more physically involved. One, because I knew that from my own experience that doing things was going to be a lot more, make things a lot easier for people to open up and talk about. Especially guys. Guys do better when they're doing things to talk about, especially tough topics. So we settled on doing a skeet shoot or a clay pigeon shoot. And so we had found a club locally, a skeet shooting club, that had done fundraisers for other people, not for fertility treatments, but other organizations. So we reached out and asked them what their thoughts were on it, and we scheduled it with them. But one of the reasons we settled on that is because it's something that most guys like to shoot. And it's something that it's a controlled enough environment that people could come. We set up an area where the kids could play that was sectioned off from the rest of everything else. So there was no danger of them getting into the area where we were shooting.
Yeah.
And we also did a little bit of an auction with it.
We had a silent auction with it. We had a big raffle with it. We had concessions. Yeah. We just anything we could think of that could bring in revenue. I feel like we had it.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
So, and we had a lot of support. We had a lot of local businesses that donated baskets, or they donated tickets to things, or, you know, we had a lot of people that maybe like that lived local that made certain goods and things like that. And that was really cool to see people jump in that really, some of these people had never even heard our story. They just saw when we announced on social media, they jumped on board and they were like, hey, can I get you this basket? Or can I do this for your silent auction? Like, I love your guys' story. And
yeah. And we
like
found
that.
out that the reason we ended up actually accepting to do the fundraiser actually came from the fact that we had the realization that we need to do this for us, but also for other people, that we were supposed to do the fundraiser in the future to help other people raise money for fertility treatments as well.
I feel like we had a pretty good turnout. We were hoping for more. Like, any fundraiser, you're like, I hope more. And it was more like we just wanted people. We had entered a point where we were like, we want people to be a part of our journey with us. Like, if you would have put us, because from the time that we started going to a clinic to that point, it had been about 2.5 years. And so we had grown a lot in those 2.5 years in accepting other people and being much more open about, like, we could talk about our journey like it was like an open book. Whereas even a year prior to that, it would be triggering. It would be, we still had those days where it's like, I'm not up for this. But we were just at a much more open part of our journey by then. And we wanted people into our story. We wanted to share it because at that point, we started finding people too that were looking for that community. They were looking for somebody else that could relate with them. And we were ready to, be that person for them, to be like, we get it. We know, we're okay with talking to you about this. We're okay with being vulnerable with you, even if you're not ready to share your story with us. And we very much started, it became healing to, like, answer people's questions. Yeah. It became healing to share our story, even when people were not ready for it. Like, we'd be out in public and people would be like, oh, do you have any kids? And we'd be like, well, actually. And we would just, start rattling off our story. And that became healing. And some people responded great to that. And they're like, oh, like, and it gave them permission to share their stories a lot of time. Or people were like, good for you. And then, that was the end of that. But it became just such like an accepted part of us.
And I think a big part of that's because of, one, the counseling helped a lot with that.
Yeah.
Having somebody express that, like, it's okay you need to talk about it.
Yeah.
You need to find a safe place to talk about it. And then we became more comfortable talking about it. And we've got a lot better at finding funny. We dealt with it with humor a lot. When we would talk to people and it was triggering, or we were worried about it being triggering, or we would have funny things that we would say to people, like, when people would ask us in the beginning of our journey, like, when people would ask us, like, when are you guys going to have kids? We'd say things like, well, we've been trying for a while. I mean, we've been trying in the living room. We've been trying in the kitchen. Do you know what position you and your wife used when she got pregnant? Like, share with us. And people would get really awkward because when they'd say something that was triggering, that was helpful to us.
Yeah.
Because it relieved it with humor.
We would just, like, joke with people.
Yes.
And some people would laugh about it. Some people would get awkward. Most of the time people laughed. And then they realized they'd overstepped their bounds. And then we were fine with it. In the beginning, though, we would just get quiet and awkward and offended. Which
I felt like weighed us down even more.
Yeah. But not that we were in a position to you can't just choose necessarily not to be offended. Yeah,
you can't just, like, turn it off.
I mean, you can choose, but it's hard. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence too. And it did. It
took a lot of counseling and, like, talking to our counselor about the fact that, like, I feel this way when I'm asked this or I'm put in these kind of positions or situations. And it did take some strategizing of, like, okay, well, if somebody asks me this, what can I say? And it took thinking through those things instead of just being like, every time somebody does this, I'm going to be triggered and I'm just going to, like, because we didn't want to live our life that way. We didn't want to live in a way that, like, our journey, like, it was our life. Like, it is our life. Like, we knew there was no escaping it. Like, it's not like somebody could tell us tomorrow that we were pregnant. And even if we were pregnant, we had all that fear that was going to continue to follow us because of, what if we lose that baby? Yeah. Even then, it's like there wasn't a time that we felt like we could relax into it.
The treatments were less scary than finding out we were pregnant.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was easier to know that there's no loss than to deal with the potential of loss that comes with, I mean, as crazy as that sounds like, that's what we prayed for years. I mean, we were trying for 5 years before we had our first kid.
Yeah.
And those 5 years were full of a lot of heartache and tears and wanting to move to get away from memories of losing kids in at the house we lived in. And
yeah. Or just being like, let's leave. Yes. There were a lot of days where we would just be like, oh, let's leave. Like, let's run away.
Yeah.
We would ask each other. It was probably at least once a month, obviously, because you go through that monthly, like, roller coaster, but you're just like, let's run away. Where should we run away to? And, sometimes maybe we would joke about it. Sometimes we would actually, be like, oh, okay, like, we're going to go do XYZ, or we're going to go to this place for the weekend, or, like, we had to find things that were going to rejuvenate us. And so, we did joke a lot.
Yeah.
We chose and got to a place where we chose to find humor in our journey.
Yeah. And we refused to be a victim as we went through it because
we knew it would be so much sweeter as a victor if we hadn't played victim the entire time.
That's a really good point.
Like, because I think that it was really easy, thinking back from where we were, to choose to be a victim, but then not choosing to be a victim, not choosing to be positive about it and to try and find a positive way to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, because we would give ourselves permission when we felt bad to spend a little bit of time and feel bad, because you have to process what we had to process. Everybody's different, what we were going through, but then being like, all right, we've had our time. It's time to move on. Because we didn't want to look back and have our story that we told our kids of how we got them to be that we were sad for the whole time. And there was a lot of heartache. I'm not sugarcoating it. Like, we were sad a lot. And there was a lot of times where
there were a lot of tears shed. A lot of,
is it worth it?
Yeah.
Tears in the bathroom.
I know why some people who go through fertility treatments choose to stop and to just adopt or not have kids at all. But choosing to live and choosing to be happy and moving on with our life, because we had a lot of life to live and we wanted to be able to share a lot of positive, fun things we went through. That's why we would, every Mother's Day and Father's Day, we would go somewhere fun and do something fun. To help cope with those triggering events and giving ourselves permission not to go to events that were triggering. But as we went through all this and we did the fundraiser, I think one of the most interesting things was seeing how many guys came out and that had been going through fertility treatments, or their wives had miscarriages, and hearing guys talk about how they wish there was more, like, support. Because in the fertility treatment process, it's very sterile. They like to remove the emotion from things, like when the nurse
the connection.
Yeah.
The connection.
It can make it easier
between a couple,
but, like, as a guy, you're put in the corner. We need you once a month to give your donation. And other than that, you sit in the corner, and that's the only involvement you have, for the most part. And your wife goes through all of this, pricking herself with needles, taking shots, going through the hormone roller coaster of up and down, feeling all the physical things that come with the treatments, and being powerless. And that's hard as a husband, to watch your wife go through that, because you would rather experience it yourself than watch somebody else go through it. And so sitting there and feeling hopeless was hard to do. And so talking to other people about how that, making it, normalizing the struggle, that like they're not crazy, that like it's normal to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And really these are things that you can do. Or asking other guys who'd been through it, what did you do to help your wife or to help you cope with the feelings of inadequacy and not being good enough? Because if you were better, you wouldn't be going through it.
Yeah.
Yikes. Going through that struggle.
Yeah. It's just, we were even talking about it earlier today. We're like, it just seems so long ago, but it felt like the never-ending night when you're going through it.
Yeah.
And, talking about this kind of, the emotions are still there.
They're not going to go away.
Yeah, no, they're not going to go away. But it's such, I feel like over and over again, we just took it day by day or hour by hour. Like we didn't have to take our whole journey one day at a time. Like a whole, like all at once, not one, like we could take it a day at a time. We could take it an hour at a time. And we gave ourselves permission to do that. And I think, especially when Jordan's sharing the fact that we'd give ourselves time to process something and then choose to pick ourselves back up and keep going. Those were the times that we were like, okay, well, we just need to make it through today. We just need to make it through the next hour. And for me, like, I handled drugs just fine. Like, if anything, that sounded really bad. But like,
what kind of drugs?
Yeah, what kind of drugs, right? Like, for me, like, I felt more normal. I know some people that's not the case, but but like for me, I felt good. I felt normal, and I didn't have huge swings or any of those things, and so it was more just like,
yeah, you did.
Oh, I did.
Yes, you did.
You always told me I didn't. So let's talk about this.
Why would you tell somebody that's going through that they're having huge mood swings?
Yeah, you.
What benefit is that going to do anybody?
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad this has now come out and you have told the truth.
It's a few years later. It's okay.
Yeah, we're good now. I've always told people, oh, I was so good on drugs, but evidently now I know that I was not.
The important thing is that you felt like you were good on drugs and that you didn't feel like you were going crazy.
Yes. We can look at it that way. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had to give ourselves permission, and we tried to also focus on different things that would help us out. Like, we would pre-plan things in our schedule that we knew aligned with what was going on in our cycle. We knew that 2 week wait, the day that your 2 week wait is up.
Yep.
And you're going to find out, is my period going to start, or am I going to, am I going to want to lay on the bathroom floor and cry? And so we would have things planned around that already, where it would be things that we look forward to doing, or it would be like during our 2 week wait or leading up to we planned things like week by week, sometimes day by day, just to keep us moving forward, because we didn't want to waste those years of our life just like waiting for things to happen.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that's the most fair thing we could do for ourselves and for our kids.
Yeah.
Because like Jordan said, we didn't want to explain to them like, hey, like we lost out on so much life because we were so busy being sad. And not that we didn't give ourselves permission to be sad or angry or whatever emotion came up.
Yeah.
But we just didn't want to waste it. Mm-hmm. And one thing I told myself almost on a daily basis was, I'm not infertile. I'm going through infertility, but I'm not infertile. Like, nobody has told me, no, absolutely not. There's no chance. They did tell us we had a 2% chance, but they didn't say no chance. They said we had 2%, and we were hanging on to that 2%, that we had 2% chance without doing IVF is what they told us, of getting pregnant and keeping the pregnancy. We had a 2% chance. But then again, we were healthy and we were textbook. So it all just didn't make sense. Right? Yeah. And so I just had to remind myself of that a lot, that I wasn't infertile. Like, infertility wasn't me. That it was just something that we were walking through. And it was a season, and I didn't know when the season was going to end, and I couldn't wait for it to end. But it wouldn't always be there. And so we went through IVF in the end of summer that year. And I was a bit overstimulated by the drugs. I did really, really good, and then like the last day I suddenly just like went right over the top, you know? And so I got overstimmed, but we were able to retrieve, what was it, 21?
Yeah, 21.
21 eggs is what they retrieved, and 11 of those blasted. And so we ended up doing a freeze on them, and it was in September that I had my retrieval. And then it was in November that I had my first transfer. Everything lined up, you know how it is. So everything lined up, and I had my first transfer, and that did not work out. That first transfer did not work out. And we were, not that we were banking on, but you know, that first transfer, you're like, okay, we got this in the bag. Like, we got this, you know?
Yeah.
And that was not the case. Nothing came back good on that. And so we were really disappointed. For obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
We were really disappointed. And of course, it's going to happen right before the holidays. Like, the most triggering time of year to be going through infertility, I feel like, is the holidays, right?
Oh, that's like a proven like thing.
Yes, very proven. And we were like, screw it all. And because if we could transfer again, our next transfer would have landed on that 2-week time period where most clinics close at the end of the year to clean, where they do like their big deep cleaning for those 2 years, and they close 2 weeks and close down. And so they were like, okay, well, do you want to go on birth control, and then we can hit you like the very first couple of days of the year? And I was like, you know, no, birth control just it's not for me. It turns me into a raging lunatic. You're like crazy. Like, he says I did pretty good on drugs. Like, I probably was like way awesome on drugs compared to the way I am on birth control. Like,
when she was on birth control, I came in the living room one day when we lived in our apartment years ago, and she was in the middle of the night, like 2:00 in the morning, crying on the living room floor, like hysterically,
like sobbing.
And I asked her what's wrong, and she's like, I have no idea.
And it was that point that was like our first year of marriage. It was that point on that we're like, we don't need birth control, we'll figure out something else. And none of that, like, thinking about it now, it's like, oh, we just didn't get pregnant because we didn't want to. Like, you know. But then, like, anyway, so live and learn, reflect, you know. So anyway, we were like, screw it. We're big Harry Potter fans. I'm wearing my Harry Potter shirt today, but we're big Harry Potter fans. We love Harry Potter, and we're like, screw it. We're gonna go to Hogwarts for Christmas. And so
Sounds so magical.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
So because we knew if we stayed home, like, we love our families, they were very supportive, but we knew, like, Christmas is a big deal in both of our families, and we knew if we stayed home, there was no way we were gonna be able to get away with not having some kind of appearance at Christmas. And so we knew either somebody would come to our house, or like, we couldn't just be like, we're just going to stay home, because we just knew that the only way to escape was to escape.
Right.
And everybody knew we were doing the transfers. So everybody wanted to know how it went.
Yeah.
And wanted to talk about how things were going.
Yeah. And we knew we wouldn't be able to see people at Christmas without them wanting to know and be caught up, and we just weren't there for that. So we booked a trip, and we chose to go down to LA, and we went to Universal and spent our time down there. And it was the morning that we woke up for our trip. I took a test, a pregnancy. I hate taking pregnancy tests for obvious reasons, but this is only like probably the second pregnancy test I had ever taken, because I always
aside from blood ones in the clinics.
Yeah,
right.
Because I always refused to take like a home pee test.
Yeah.
Like I just couldn't.
Yeah.
But I woke up that morning because I was like, okay, I need to mentally prepare myself for the fact that I won't be able to get my drugs, and we won't be able to do another cycle until February. Like I'll miss, because I would have needed to go pick up my drugs and then head to the airport is what I would have needed to do. And my period wasn't starting.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I need to take this test so I can mentally prepare myself for the fact that my period is going to start on this trip. Like that's just what I need to do for myself. And so it was like 4:00 in the morning, and I wake up and I take that test, and it came back positive. And I was like, what? Like, we spent all this money, we did all these things. Like, what? Like, how is this? Like, it was an off month. Like, I didn't have a transfer. And so I wake Jordan up and I'm like, Jordan, it's positive. He's like, what? Like, he's still dead asleep. He's like, what? What? And I'm like, it's positive. And he's like, I'm like, the pregnancy test is positive. And he's like, oh.
I want to clarify. She came over to the edge of the bed and put it in my face.
Yeah.
Well, I was asleep still, basically.
And he was like, oh. And I'm like, how about you get up? Let's pack. Like, and we literally did not talk about it the entire trip. We did not say a thing about it the entire trip, because we're like, this isn't real. Like, we called our clinic like, once we had flown in, once we landed, we called the clinic. We're like, hey, like, we're going to need to come and get a blood test. We have a positive test, but we're out of town. So, like, when we get back, we're going to need to get a blood test. But we didn't talk about it the rest of the trip. We were in complete denial. Like, nope, I'm not pregnant. Like, and if I am pregnant, like, okay, now let's worry about losing this baby. And we're like, we're just not going to talk about it. We're going to act like it, like,
right.
Nope. We're just going to enjoy this trip. We're going to enjoy our Christmas. We are going to enjoy Hogsmeade. We're going to drink it up with our butterbeer, and I'm going to buy myself a wand. Like, we were, and we did. We really enjoyed ourselves. We enjoyed our time together. We enjoyed that trip so much. And we came back, and I remember driving from the airport to the fertility clinic and just praying that if I was pregnant, if I was indeed pregnant, that, like, just let this baby stick. Because it also brought in that fear of, like, okay, like, I felt like with IVF, at least I had some control, right? With IVF, you, like, time it out, it happens, like, you have, like, you're being monitored, like, every second of every day for those first 9 weeks, and I felt like I was back into that, like, no control zone. Not that you have control, like that fake control zone, you know, that you create for yourself with infertility. And I was just praying that if it was that, like, because I didn't have control, didn't feel like I had the control because it didn't happen because of a transfer, that I would still have some comfort and I'd be able to take it day by day. And we went in, and it was positive. And we went in the next day, and my numbers kept going up and kept going up and kept going up. And that little guy we didn't know it was a guy at the time, but, you know, he kept growing. And I remember hitting our 9 week, and we graduated, and we're like, okay, like, what do we do now? you know, like, we have an awesome OB, and he continued to see me, weekly he would run my blood for me, because he knew there was no way that I was going to survive. And so he would run my blood for me weekly. I think I had him run it weekly until I was at like 16 weeks. Just because I was so antsy. And two, at week 10, I had a hemorrhage. And so I was like, here we go. Like, this is just how it goes because I couldn't control it.
Yeah.
You know, I can't control this. I couldn't control it because it's not from IVF and like all of these things. So then I'm like, all right, here we go, baby number 3. And that hemorrhage, luckily, it was below the baby. So we were okay. And I was like, okay, we're good. And then a week and a half later, I had another hemorrhage.
Oh my gosh.
And that one was closer to him. And it was bigger, but it bled out and we were just fine. And but too, again, it was just like a whole nother, just having to call Jordan and be like, I'm bleeding, you know? And just reliving those losses. Like with every single time you go to the bathroom, like it's so hard. It's so hard. And knowing that I think the hardest thing for me going through, you know, the loss of our babies was the fact like, and even now, like even sometimes, you know, now with our little babies, as I'm sitting there, I'm like, I missed out on this. Like I have a baby that I don't get to jump on the tramp with you, you know, like even though I have the blessing of, you know, our babies that are here now, like you still have that gut feeling, like it doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
And I know Jordan very much feels that too as a dad, like the what ifs of loss. And that's totally normal, but it runs deep. It does run deep. And or when you see or know people that you knew when you were going through that had like a kid around the same time, you're just like, whoa, I would have an 8-year-old. Like,
yeah.
you know, things like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Remy ended up having a little guy, and he's like the energy of everything. He is the busiest guy.
He is.
He's hilarious. But
even after we found out that the pregnancy was viable, you still continued to go to, you switched from an infertility support group to a PALE group, pregnancy after infertility and loss.
Mm-hmm. I did. I switched over from that group that I was with Sarah's Laughter. They have a pregnancy after infertility and loss group.
That sounds so
And
needed.
so, yeah. And so through my pregnancy, you know, because I had graduated from like the infertility group. So through my pregnancy, I had that group. And that was such a huge help to have that community of women that they were in the same spot. They were pregnant, but, you know, they had loss, or they had been going through infertility, or, you know, a lot of them, like they had, you know, about half of them had actually had their babies, but still needed the support of just knowing that, like, you know, it is hard being a mom after you've gone through infertility. Because I remember going to my counselor while I was pregnant and after we had him, and just being like, I shouldn't feel ungrateful. Like, I shouldn't, you know, feel XYZ or whatever it is, because I went through all of this. Like, I prayed for this, you know, in a way, and so then coping with all of those emotions can be a lot, because you expect to just like, well, I wanted this and I worked so hard for this. They're like, why can't I just be the perfect little, like, why can't things be picturesque or whatever it is? And I did. With both, well, every single pregnancy I had, my losses and all, I had postpartum depression. And I remember my very first loss, I had postpartum depression, and thank heavens for Jordan. And Jordan had experienced some things with his mom, and had experience of depression with his mother. And he knew what to do. He knew what the signs were. And he literally had to take me to, I was like, I don't have a baby to have depression over with my first miscarriage. And he had to he had to make my doctor's appointment for me. And then I remember the morning of, he was like, so you're going to your doctor's appointment today, right? And I was like, no, not unless you come and pick me up. And so I made him, okay, at the time he worked at the hospital I needed to go to. He had to leave the hospital, come and pick me up from work, and drive me back.
You're such a good
to where he was at, and then drive me back to work afterwards. And so I would, because he knew I needed the help, and he was there for me and stood up for me. And same thing with my second, I ended up getting it. And with Remy, I had postpartum depression, but also mixed with all of those emotions of, I prayed for this hard, and why isn't it easier, or whatever it was that day for me. Mm-hmm. And to having postpartum anxiety, didn't even know that was a thing, but like having the anxiety of like something you wanted so bad and being so afraid that it was going to be taken from you at the same time. And, it wasn't like we all have seasons. Everything's a season in our life. And some things tie into one another and some things don't.
Yeah. Some
things are just there to teach you a singular thing, and then some things just continue to snowball. And I guess that's just how we find ourselves. Mm-hmm. But it seems so daunting at times.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because it was during that time that I found the support group for men that was virtual, but it was all the way on the East Coast. So it was over Zoom.
Yeah.
And it was during, no, it wasn't.
Oh yeah, it was during COVID.
It was during COVID.
Yeah.
So they were all virtual anyway.
We hid that we were even pregnant because we found out we were pregnant. And then it was like a month later, everybody, like before I was even showing her anything, everybody went into, quarantine. Yeah. And so nobody knew. And we were like, this is a gift from God. Like, nobody can ask us questions. Like, we don't have to see people. Like,
we didn't get excited till 20 weeks.
Yeah.
For the pregnancy. Because we were constantly,
on
I can't
edge.
say we. I was constantly nervous and anxious that it was going to not work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's very understandable.
Yeah. And then once we got to know the gender and like, we got past the 20 week, even though after 10 weeks, statistically, your chances of miscarriage went down dramatically every week after that. Still worrying about that happening. Mm-hmm. I mean, and now looking back, it's interesting because a lot of the animosity we've had toward people and feelings of hurt are gone, when in the moment it seemed like they were going to last forever.
Yeah.
And
life was always going to be like that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, even though we're very positive, happy-go-lucky people, uplifting people, but there was this thing that every time you met a young couple that was around your age, worrying about like if they're just going to be like, we've been married, and every time we've tried, we've got pregnant, and it's stuck, and our kids never do anything wrong.
Which we know as parents, no one is.
Anyone
who
says that is a liar.
Yeah.
Kids are wonderful and they're amazing, but
we do things wrong. Let's be honest. Just as, like, I would like to say functioning humans, but we're not. No one's a functioning human, right? No one's a functioning human.
But going through the fertility treatments was actually really, as weird as it is to say, it was really good for our marriage. Mm-hmm. Because it forced us to talk about stuff and go through things that a lot of people don't go through, and they avoid, struggle.
Or don't go through together.
Yeah.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
And even though infertility treatments, there's the chances of divorce go up dramatically, and that depends on whether or not the couple goes through it together and and it's not everybody's situation. Not everybody can go to treatments together, but we were determined not to let it drive a wedge between us. And so we tried to do everything together and lean into each other with the struggle, which is hard sometimes as a guy, because sometimes you just want to fix stuff.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can fix.
Yeah.
It'll make it worse.
Yeah.
If you try and fix it.
Yeah, we had a code going through
Yeah.
everything. We still use it, but it's like, take your tool belt off. I don't need to be fixed. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not broken. Take your tool belt off. And like, that was something Jordan and I had to learn, that we needed to take our tool belts off and just be there for each other and not try to fix the situation, because we couldn't. It was unfixable.
Yeah.
Like, we could do what we could do, but then at the end of the day, you can't do anything else, and you just need to be there for each other.
Yeah.
And for me, being comfortable with confronting my own emotions, which is really hard as a guy to do, but reading both counseling and then reading the book by...
Oh, was it Wild at Heart?
No. Also a good book.
Also a good book.
But not the right book. Daring Greatly.
Oh, yes, Daring Greatly. Brene Brown.
Brene Brown. Because it talks about vulnerability. And there's a quote in there where she talks about how only when you learn to embrace your own darkness can you become comfortable with other people in their darkness.
Yeah.
Which, when you're dealing with your spouse's emotions, they're tied to you, and so you have to become comfortable with that, which is really hard. Especially since I'm someone that I'm either happy or ugly cry. It's like
1 to 100.
there's nothing.
Yes.
There's no in between, and it sucks. I don't like dealing with emotions. And being vulnerable is hard, and it sucks, and it's not fun.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plenty of vulnerability hangovers throughout this whole process. If you've read Brene Brown's books, like, yes, lots of vulnerability hangovers.
Yeah.
On both parts.
But the whole journey, looking back, even though it was really hard, there's things that we learned throughout it, and it helped us in some ways. And
yeah, I say all the time, I've probably said this to you, Mariah, but like, I would not wish infertility on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't take it out of my story for anything.
I think I'm finally to the point now, just with like our story, that I'm like, okay, you know, like, now that we're here where we are, I don't think even we're not even, when we're recording this, we're not even to our transfer yet. Like, we're a week away from our transfer. And up to this point, I mean, the last 4 years, like, I wouldn't redo it, and I wouldn't like wish that it wasn't. I mean, I know what you're trying to say. Ooh,
Yeah.
And I can echo that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I would ever feel that way.
Yeah.
But even now, you know, they kind of giving some more context, like, over the last couple of years, like, we had Remy in 2020, and we asked, like, okay, well, what do we need to do now? And they're like, well, we give you 18 months and you can see how things work out. And if you aren't pregnant by then naturally, then we'll start testing again. And at a year, we're like, well, what do we have to lose? Like, we're already 5 years into this. We have 10 babies in the freezer. That sounds also
We've got 11. It's okay.
We got 10 blasts, okay? Not full on babies, guys. Everybody understands what we're saying on this podcast. Thanks. Thankfully. Thank heaven. You know, we're like, what do we have to lose? You know, we've got what we need on the back end, but, you know, let's just see. And we got pregnant with our little girl at 16 months. And same thing, we had hemorrhages with her. And luckily she stuck and we kept her. And she's 10 months now and she's super fun and smiley. But, you know, we don't know what the next step is. We don't know how anything else looks.
Yeah.
And just remembering that, like, your story is not defined by what you're going through. It's defined by how you choose to react to it. And we had to choose a lot, and still on a daily basis, just living life, we have to choose the way we want to react to have a certain outcome in our life. Because you will speak what you want into your life. And I think we very directly learned a lot about ourselves and learned that about ourselves as we were going through our journey. Because I would not be who I am. Our relationship would not be what it is. You know, the kind of parents we are now, the kind of friends we are now. There's so many things about myself that I would not be without having experienced that 5-year winter in my life. That's literally what it felt like.
Yeah.
Even though I talk about these sunshines and how I tried to be positive, like
Right.
it was a winter season for us. And like, I'm still brought back to those days. Like I had with my little girl, I had really severe depression and anxiety, and had to really work through that with like counseling and medication and things like that. And it like took me right back to that winter.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm done with this winter. Why are you taking me back to it? But same thing, like we learn lessons and we walk paths when we're supposed to in our life. Mm-hmm. And we don't have control of that. Sometimes we do, most of the time we don't, right? But
Yes.
but you don't take them back. Like it's crazy that some of the things that we pray for end up being the hardest things that we do. But they're the most rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. And I hope that anybody who hears this doesn't, because one of the most painful things is to compare your story to somebody else's. Mm-hmm. And when you're going through it, the only helpful thing anybody can say is, I'm sorry, that sucks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because anything else feels like you're being patronized.
A downplay, yeah.
And so, like, I hope that it brings some comfort to people as they go through their own stories, because although we're in a different stage now, like, we can relate to what people are going through, and sorry for the struggles you may be going through.
Yeah. And too, we had to learn on our journey, I feel like a lot. Like, I had to learn that comparison was my thief of joy. Because I would meet people that are like, oh yeah, we went through infertility for 2 months. You know, like those people are like...
That's not infertility.
No,
you just didn't line up when you're having sex
you,
with when you're on your cycle.
You know, or
That's
you
not
have the comparison of, you know, somebody that is, you know, on their 15th year and their second surrogate. Like
that
there's...
sucks. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
Like,
you know,
like you just can't allow comparison to be that thief of your joy, because really it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so if anything, just anybody who's listening, I hope that you see and know that, like, you are worthy, you are enough. And baby in hands or baby in womb or not, or you have answers and you know what your path looks like, or you don't have answers. You know, we had unexplained infertility. We didn't have answers. You're still enough. You're more than enough. Like, there's no one thing in your life that could change how worthy you are to be the best and greatest person and the most impactful person on this planet. Like no one thing will change all of that. And that includes whether or not, you know, there's another line on your test or whether or not your score goes up or down, or how many eggs. Like, just love yourself. I think if I had to pass that on, just love yourself for where you're at, and it will give you a larger capacity to love everybody else for where they're at. Because I really do believe everybody is doing the best that they can with what they have. So I just hope if I could go back and tell myself that and truly believe it, like truly get myself to believe that sooner in my journey, that would make all the difference. So, yeah.
That was so perfectly said, Shelly.
Oh,
It was so perfectly said.
thanks.
Do you guys have, maybe we can take turns, if you guys both have like one piece of advice that you would maybe give. I usually have people, whenever I ask this question, like it's very geared to like pieces of advice for somebody going through this. But since you guys are here, here's a couple specifically for couples going through this.
Yes.
So who wants to go first?
I'll let Jordan go.
Jordan's feeling it.
So
I can see it. It's on the tip of his tongue.
it would be to bite the bullet and go to counseling and stop trying to fix it and be there for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I know that as guys, we want to fix it to make it feel like we're making a difference because we have no control over the situation.
Yeah.
But it just makes the situation harder when you try and have some sort of control. I can talk. Then, yeah, just to go through it together, stop trying to fix it, and find somebody who is specifically an infertility counselor, even if they're virtual and not in person. Most insurances will pay
find
for it.
the right counselor.
Yeah.
We went through a handful of counselors before we found who we worked with, and it's all the difference.
If they don't have
the right person.
experience in counseling people that are going through fertility treatments, not infertility, but fertility treatments, then their advice can be more hurtful than helpful.
Yeah.
And so finding somebody who has experience in talking to people who are going through fertility treatments, and even if your insurance won't pay for it, it's worth, most of them will do a graduated pay charge scale dependent on your income.
Yeah.
And
or something, they'll work it out.
Even if it costs you $60 a visit, I think is what it cost us.
Yeah.
It was worth it to pay every week and go. Even though it was on top of our fertility treatments.
I feel like when you're paying thousands of dollars, though, like
$65, like
You know, I know, right?
I mean it's a ton of money, but it's like if you can get some help throughout the whole process and be able to be your best self and be able to function the most, like so worth it.
And to just know you have somebody in your corner.
Yeah.
Like, granted, yes, we had a lot of people in our corner, but one person in our corner that we felt could actually like point us in a direction and like see what we couldn't see in our blind spots emotionally and actually address those with us. Like we had given them permission to address them with us.
Yeah.
So,
Your turn.
My advice. I guess my advice is just remember you're not broken. Like as an individual, as a couple, like you're not broken. Like you are whole. And that's what makes you capable of things you don't think you're capable of. Like you do have the capacity. You have more capacity than you think you do. And sometimes that capacity is pretty thin, but you do have it. Like you can do it. Like you can make it to that, the end of that next 2-week wait. Like you can make it to that next transfer date, or you can make it through, that next family dinner if that's where you're at.
Yeah.
And I also give you permission to say no.
Yes.
So it's okay to say no so that you can say yes. And not in like a mopey way, but in an empowering way. Like you have to learn that. That you are capable of having that capacity because you're not broken. You're more than you think you are. And I think it will surprise you even when you wake up tomorrow. You had the capacity to make it till tomorrow. So just bank on the fact that you are not infertility. You're going through it, but it is not you. So that would be my advice, I guess. So,
Jordan and Shelly, you guys are amazing. Seriously, thank you so much for being with me today.
thank you for having us. This has been so much fun.
Good. I'm glad. You guys are wonderful people, and I love your story, and I love how just open and willing you guys are to share. It's gonna be hard to do.
It can. It can.
But thank you. I'm so positive like somebody's gonna be able to listen to this and be like, oh, that's a good thing. Oh, that's a good piece of advice. Oh, I love that too. Oh, I can take that in my life too. So
good.
Seriously, thank you so much, you guys.
Yes,
I really appreciate
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hope that this helps somebody, or at least give somebody someone to laugh at.
Yeah. We love that too. Thanks so much for being here, guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye.